When we meet consciousness, most of us think of it as a switch flipping off, the room going dark, and everything fading away. But in Buddhist wisdom, that meeting is not an ending, it's a reveal. The body grows quiet, the breath loosens, and what we've always taken to be, the world dissolves. What remains isn't emptiness, it is the mind, uncovered, finally seen without the noise of the senses. And suddenly, the life we practiced inside our thoughts becomes the landscape we stand in. The habits we fed for years don't disappear. The anxieties we rehearsed, the resentments we clung to, the patience we cultivated, the compassion we returned to, all of it becomes the texture of experience itself. It's like waking into a dream that doesn't know it's a dream, where consciousness is no longer hidden behind the skull, but stretches outward as the space everything happens in. Thoughts don't just pass through anymore. They form shapes. Emotions don't just color our mood. They become weather. A single intention begins to behave like gravity, pulling reality toward it. For a mind that has never been observed, this moment can feel overwhelming. The familiar rules, solid walls, predictable routines, the comfort of distraction fall away. The inner world we ignored during life steps forward as the main stage. A fleeting fear swells into an entire atmosphere. A spark of craving becomes a world of endless chasing. And it becomes clear why the Buddhist masters say that the afterlife is not so much a new location as it is consciousness continuing without the body's limits. Here, the ego, stripped of titles, roles, and explanations, has nothing left to hide behind. We enter a realm where intention builds the paths we walk, emotion becomes the climate around us, and memory rises like mountains on the horizon. What we trained is what we travel through, and unless awareness wakes up, we risk being carried by the same unexamined mind that shaped our days, until wisdom finally recognizes itself, and freedom opens like a doorway we didn't know was there. In the Bardo, there is no body to anchor perception, no eyes or ears to shape what arrives, no brain to filter or slow anything down. Consciousness stands bare, like a projector without a frame, pouring images straight into open space with nothing to soften them. Buddhist teachers describe this as the moment when the creative spark of mind is revealed, the point where thought and appearance no longer feel separate, where imagining and experiencing blur into one movement. Here, fear doesn't stay small, it unfolds into landscapes. It might take the shape of a dark gorge with shifting shadows, or an endless fall where there is nothing to stand on. Craving doesn't remain a quiet longing. It flowers into glittering heavens made from every pleasure the heart once chased, dazzling yet unstable. The untrained mind has no idea it is wandering inside its own projection, and so it grabs hold of these visions as if they exist outside. That grasping hardens the dream until it functions like reality, with rules, climates, and beings that seem completely independent. Picture the mind as an artist whose brush is emotion, whose pigments are karmic habits, and whose canvas is awareness itself. All the unfinished business we carried, buried grief, ignored wounds, unresolved desires, unspoken truths, becomes the material from which the Bardo shapes entire environments. Even the peaceful and fierce figures described in Tibetan texts are not gods in the ordinary sense. They are parts of the psyche shown at full volume, revealing exactly what our inner world has contained all along. The gentle forms rise from compassion, clarity, and wisdom. The terrifying ones surge up from repressed anger, guilt, shame, and dread. And because the Bardo amplifies everything, their force and presence seem larger than any myth we could have imagined. The tragedy is that most beings flee from their own mind-made visions, believing them to be external threats instead of reflections. They do not realize that recognition, simple, fearless seeing, dissolves the illusion. In this way, the Bardo becomes a psychological universe, not as a metaphor, but as an actual architecture. Consciousness itself acts as the builder, the landscape designer, the storyteller, and the traveler moving through the very worlds it creates. Tibetan teachers never describe the Bardo as a magical fantasy. They describe it as lawful, governed by principles even more exact than the physics we know. In this realm, intention behaves like a force. Emotion acts like gravity. Attention gives things their outline, and memory supplies the plans that shapes rise from. Picture awareness like a sun, sending out rays, each ray a thought. In ordinary life, those rays are scattered and faint, barely strong enough to move anything. In the Bardo, they flare instantly, lighting entire worlds into being. The reason is brutally simple. The brain is no longer present to filter or soften experience. During life, it screens out most of what consciousness could perceive, so we don't collapse under the overload. In the Bardo, there is no such protection. The mind arrives unfiltered, direct, total, and creation happens with the speed of a dream, yet with the density and persistence of matter. This is why Tibetan masters place such emphasis on training attention while we are alive. Whatever attention clings to after death becomes the seed of the next vision, the next environment, the next life unfolding. Attention becomes the sculptor, emotion supplies the material, memory adds color and texture. Karma approves the structure and sets its limits. Together, they weave worlds so convincing that the traveler forgets they are walking through their own projections. Think of the way a nightmare feels absolutely real until the instant you wake up. The Bardo magnifies that experience beyond anything imaginable. Fear does not invent a single threatening shape under the bed. It spreads into entire realms populated with beings molded from the very insecurities that produced them. Here, every thought echoes louder. Every belief stands outside you. Every doubt appears as something you can meet face to face. And with no body to anchor perception, the mind becomes fluid in all directions, capable of generating multiple scenes at once, bending timelines, and layering realities over one another as awareness shifts. This is the hidden mechanism behind why training is necessary. Without clarity, no judge is needed to punish or confine us. The mind does the work itself, freezing unexamined thoughts into worlds as quickly and irrevocably as lightning turns into thunder. Buddhist teachers explain that the Bardo is shaped not by chance and not by an outside judge, but by powerful inner currents. Four forces rise to the surface there and begin steering consciousness: fear, desire, karma, and memory. Working together, they carve the after-death landscape more convincingly than any mythic ruler ever could. Fear moves first because it grabs the mind with speed. It doesn't gently suggest, it seizes. In the Bardo, that contraction becomes a kind of gravity, pulling the traveler into atmospheres of dread where everything seems hostile and closing in. Desire follows with a very different flavor. It spins worlds that shimmer with beauty and promise, recreating pleasures once chased in life. These realms aren't gifts from outside. They appear because craving radiates form the way fire radiates heat, irresistible but never ultimately satisfying. Karma enters not as punishment but as momentum. It is the pattern of habits, the grooves worn into consciousness by countless choices. Just as water flows down a channel carved over time, awareness drifts toward familiar emotional landscapes, repeating stories it never resolved. Then, memory rises, perhaps the most seductive force of all. It projects lifelike scenes into the Bardo, homes from childhood, conversations never finished, faces of those we loved. These visions are tender, luminous, and heartbreakingly convincing, and for that very reason, they can hold a soul in place longer than any nightmare. Imagine meeting someone you adored who died years before, feeling their embrace, hearing their voice softened by light, without realizing that the encounter is woven from longing and attachment. Tibetan masters warn that even seasoned practitioners can be captivated by such visions. overlooking the brilliant clarity that lies just beyond them. In this way, fear, desire, karma, and memory don't punish the soul. They simply reveal it. The Bardo becomes a mirror that reflects everything we carried, with nothing left blurred or hidden. Liberation, then, is not about fleeing these forces, but recognizing them for what they are. The instant awareness sees through them, the scenes break apart like thin shells, exposing the radiant openness beneath. Yet, for a mind that has never practiced seeing clearly, these forces feel solid and absolute. And so, consciousness wanders from realm to realm, never realizing it is walking inside a labyrinth built entirely from the architecture of its own mind. To understand why consciousness can become trapped in the Bardo, we have to face one of its deepest paradoxes. The mind does not recognize its own dream unless awareness steps in. And in the Bardo, the dream is so vivid, so total, that almost everyone mistakes their inner projections for an outer universe. Tibetan teachings call this the Great Forgetting, the moment when self-recognition slips away and the soul becomes tangled in what it created. Like a spider wrapped in strands of its own web, karmic tendencies begin to pull awareness toward particular scenes, charging them with emotion until they feel inevitable. Fear narrows the field of perception, hardening these visions until they seem solid and final. Attachment to identity sends the soul searching for whatever looks familiar: the faces of loved ones, cultural images, comforting beliefs. And these familiar shapes become invisible cages, dressed up as heavens or hells. A soul may wander into a radiant paradise filled with pleasure and beauty, convinced it has reached a final reward, never realizing it has stepped into a desire-born illusion that will eventually dissolve, leaving confusion in its wake. Others drift into realms defined by terror, where every moment feels endless because fear drives attention. Attention fuels manifestation, and manifestation intensifies fear. The mind becomes caught in a feedback loop that can seem to stretch across ages. The most heartbreaking entanglement happens when memory fashions lifelike replicas of those once cherished. The soul embraces them, certain it has reunited with family, unaware that these figures cannot truly grow or guide. They are reflections formed from longing, frozen in time. Tibetan masters warn that beings can remain inside such illusions for what feels like eons, moving from one dreamlike world to another, never noticing that the doorway to freedom has never been closed. The escape does not come from force or flight. It comes from recognition, the brief, piercing realization, "This is my mind." In that instant, the landscape cracks and dissolves, revealing the clear light that has been present from the beginning. But because most people never practice watching their thoughts while alive, they fail to recognize those same thoughts when they rise without a body. And so, the Bardo stops functioning as a passageway and becomes a maze, wandering through self-created worlds that seem real only because they were never questioned. Tibetan masters teach that even in the most overwhelming illusions of the Bardo, something remains untouched. It is called Rigpa, the clear, open awareness that watches everything without being swept away. Rigpa is not another thought or emotion, and it isn't a memory. It is the quiet presence that remains when every image dissolves, the simple knowing that outlives every world the mind creates. Within this presence lies the key to traveling the Bardo with steadiness and skill. Imagine standing inside a storm so fierce that mountains crumble and oceans rise, yet discovering, right at the center of your being, a stillness nothing can disturb. That stillness is always there, whether anyone recognizes it or not. The tragedy is that most souls never notice it. The visions of the Bardo blaze so brightly and feel so urgent that attention is captured and dragged outward. But the teachings say that the moment you glimpse even the slightest trace of this awareness, the instant you can say, "This vision is happening within me, but it is not who I am," the entire landscape begins to soften. Terrifying forms diminish into mist. Gentle figures dissolve into light. Vast realms fade like dreams at dawn, because awareness is the one element the Bardo cannot control. The process is simple, even if recognizing it is difficult. When awareness withdraws its fixation, attention loosens. When attention loosens, the form collapses. When form collapses, light remains, and the soul rises to clearer states of experience. This is why trained practitioners are said to navigate the Bardo with unusual clarity. They learn during life to stay awake inside their own minds, even when chaos erupts. So, when the visions after death expand beyond anything imaginable, they remember the essential truth: the witness is real, the worlds are appearances. From that recognition, liberation does not come through struggle, but through understanding. For those who rest in pure awareness, the Bardo stops feeling like a trap. It becomes a corridor, not a labyrinth, a mirror rather than a storm, a luminous theater in which every scene is already dissolving, quietly pointing the traveler back toward the infinite. Those who awaken do not move through the Bardo the way an ordinary soul moves through a world. They move through it the way a lucid dreamer moves through a dream, fully aware of its fluid nature, calm in the face of its storms, unwilling to be captured by what they see. When peaceful deities appear, they recognize them as expressions of their own clarity and compassion. When fierce deities arise, they bow not out of fear, but out of understanding, knowing these forms are unintegrated emotions finally revealing themselves. Because they neither cling to beauty nor recoil from terror, nothing can hook them. The visions roll by like weather drifting across an open sky. The awakened pass through scenes that would crush untrained minds. Corridors of fire, oceans writhing with serpents, shifting labyrinths of impossible geometry, and recognize each as a symbolic echo of the psyche's unfinished work. Memory-made heavens dissolve at a glance. Familiar faces appear, but they do not grasp at them, because they know attachment tethers consciousness back into the cycle of rebirth. Tibetan teachings say these beings navigate by an inner sun, a steady light in the heart that does not flicker. No matter how chaotic the visions become, that inner radiance acts like a compass, always pointing toward freedom. For the awakened, the Bardo is not primarily a threat. It becomes a rare opening, a chance to see the nature of mind so clearly that rebirth turns from obligation into choice. When the moment arrives that pulls most souls toward new lives through desire and karmic gravity, the awakened simply watch. They see visions surge and fade without stepping into them. As attention relaxes, the scenes evaporate, leaving only boundless, luminous space. From there, they can dissolve completely into pure awareness, return consciously to serve others, or remain in subtle realms guiding those still wandering. In this way, the awakened cross the Bardo not by force, but by presence. They don't fight the visions, they recognize them, and that recognition becomes the very freedom every soul longs for, though few learn to cultivate it before the journey begins. Liberation arises at the precise moment when thought no longer has the strength to hold the soul. It dawns when consciousness recognizes that every realm, every figure, every fear, and every paradise appeared within awareness rather than existing outside it. And when even the sense of dissolves, the Bardo collapses into pure brilliance. This brilliance is not physical light, but the self-shining clarity of awareness realizing itself. Tibetan teachings describe this as the unborn state, the original condition before form, identity, or imagination ever arose. In this space, there is nothing left to meet and nothing left to manage. There are no deities to understand, no landscapes to cross, because the traveler has dissolved. What remains is the boundless field of awareness, aware of itself. This is the freedom that ends the turning of rebirth, the moment when karma loses its gravity, because there is no longer anyone to cling, fear, crave, or remember. Although this realization is available to every being, many miss it, distracted by the splendor and terror of their own projections. Liberation is said to be like a door that opens briefly, wide, luminous, unmistakable, while the soul runs past chasing visions. But for the one who recognizes the nature of mind, even for an instant, the entire structure of the Bardo melts away, revealing the truth that was always waiting. You were never moving inside the Bardo. The Bardo was arising inside you. As this journey draws to a close, remember that life itself is the training ground for that single recognition. The thoughts you cultivate now shape not only the path of this lifetime, but the landscapes you will meet beyond it. So, let this understanding deepen your practice, sharpen your awareness, and steady your heart. And if this teaching resonates, stay close to Zen Buddhism, because everything shared here exists to help you remember your true nature long before you ever cross the threshold of the Bardo.